The officers didn't knock. They shattered the quiet like a bottle hurled at concrete. Boots thudding down the hall, the rustle of jackets, the clipped command to clear the kitchen. A second later, cold hands were on my wrists and the smell of rain and gun oil filled my foyer. I was still wearing the silk blouse I'd chosen for mercy, not war. Cream, delicate, useless against the metal that clicked shut around my bones. "Olivia Mercer," the taller one said, voice steady, face unreadable. "You're under arrest for the murder of your husband, Daniel Mercer." Murder. The word ripped through me, clean as glass. On the stairs above us, a hinge creaked. Eleanor stood there, my mother-in-law, wrapped in a black cardigan she favored for funerals and boardrooms. The cardigan swallowed her frame, but her eyes burned needle bright. She pressed a tissue to the corner of one eye, dabbed at nothing, and gave the officers a tremulous nod, as if she'd been waiting for them. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking in the exact place you'd rehearse if you practiced crying in a mirror. "Please, be gentle. She's grieving. We all are." The hand on my elbow tightened, guiding me toward the door. Flashbulbs exploded outside the beveled glass like fireworks ricocheting down the cul-de-sac. A reporter shouted my name. Another shouted poison, as if saying it would conjure it, as if saying it could make me the kind of woman who laces decanters and waits for a heartbeat to quit. Daniel had been dead 12 hours. 12 hours since I'd found him slumped on the leather club chair in the library, the storm swallowing Beacon Hill in sheets. A vinyl crackle on the turntable still spinning Coltrane, the decanter of Barolo sweating in the half-light, rain ticking against the panes like someone impatient at the door. He looked like he'd fallen asleep after 1,000 dinners just like it, only he hadn't. His lips had blued. His pulse had gone somewhere I couldn't reach. I tried not to see that chair when they put my head down and my shoulders into the squad car. Tried not to see the smear of my lipstick on the rim of my wine glass, the way his cufflink had caught the arm of the chair, the fact that I hadn't noticed it then. I'd noticed nothing. I'd called 911 with hands that weren't hands, and waited for sirens that sounded like they were coming for someone else. Eleanor lingered at the curb, a silent benediction of grief for the cameras. She touched the roof of the cruiser as if to baptize it. Then her gaze slid to mine, and for one electric heartbeat, the performance fell away. Under the velvet, there it was, the thing I'd felt for 2 years, the thing I'd reasoned away. Not dislike, not disdain. Calculation. A woman to whom love was leverage, and loss an opportunity. The door slammed. The cruiser pulled away. The wipers scraped a rhythm I couldn't stand. At the precinct, the fluorescent lights made everything crueler. The pale smear of makeup on my collarbone, the hair tie biting my wrist, the paper cup of water I didn't drink. I answered their questions with the facts arranged in a line, like knives on a towel. We'd eaten at 8. Daniel handled the decanter. I poured glasses. He went to the library to finish an email to Tokyo. I changed into the blouse. I joined him. We argued, softly, stupidly, about a charity gala I didn't want to attend without him. He touched my hand. He said, "Go." I said, "Not without you." He stood. He sat. He didn't stand again. A detective with a pen chewed nearly in half asked about the pharmacy bottle they'd found in my pantry, atropine sulfate, unprescribed, hidden behind the Malden salt. He asked about the powdered residue in the decanter. He asked about the search history on my laptop, fatal arrhythmia, digitalis, Slayer statutes. I didn't search those, I said, and heard how small it sounded, like a child insisting the cookie jar had moved itself. "We have the logs," he said, so gentle I wanted to break something. When they offered me one phone call, I didn't call my parents in Maine, who would drive through the night and arrive with casseroles and blankets, as if casseroles and blankets could fix a hole like this. I called Marcus Liu, because if I was going to survive, I needed someone who loved the sound of a statute more than a lullaby. Don't say another word, Marcus said, already moving, already assembling an army. I'm coming. We'll get you out. It took 6 hours to post bail. Rain turned to a gray that wasn't day and wasn't night. When they buzzed me back to the lobby, Marcus stood there with his tie loosened, midnight in his eyes, and a folder under his arm swollen with paper that had been thin 12 hours ago. "It's bad," he said, as we slid into the back of his car. "But bad doesn't mean impossible." "How bad?" He opened the folder just enough to let me see the outline of a weapon I hadn't known existed. Prosecutor's theory: cardiac glycosides in the wine. The atropine bottle is your delivery decoy. The decanter wipe tests lit up like a pinball machine. Digital forensics put the searches on your laptop at 2:17 a.m. I was asleep at 2:17. You were at home at 2:17. Where else would I be? His silence was not an answer. We'll challenge chain of custody. We'll challenge IP attribution. We'll challenge everything. But, Olivia, there's something else. He closed the folder. Daniel updated his will 3 months ago. The amendment transfers his voting shares in Mercer and Pike directly to you if he dies while married to you. There is also he hesitated, looking for a word that wouldn't cut me, a standard Slayer clause. If you're convicted of his murder, you're disqualified as a beneficiary. The shares revert to the next of kin. "Eleanor," I said, and felt the room tilt, the car tilt, the world tilt on a blade I had not seen until I was already bleeding. "She stands to gain if I go to prison." "Not just gain," Marcus said, "control." A memory flickered. Eleanor across a boardroom table, chin lifted, pearl earring catching the light, while the men around her measured their greed against her patience. The way she held a pen like a conductor's baton. The way she could say, "Of course, dear," and make the "dear" sound like a diagnosis. "You think she—" The sentence broke under its own weight. "I think someone wanted you to look guilty," Marcus said, "and someone who knows corporate bylaws and optics and timing had every reason to want you out of the way." It would be months before I learned about the neighbor's Ring camera blocked by a strategic florist delivery, the temp worker hired by a shell company to scrub server logs, the cash wire that whisked its way through 2 Cayman shadows before paying a debt that didn't exist. It would be months before I found the first thread and tugged, gently at first, then with both hands, until the whole sweater came off the body and lay there on the floor, a heap of lies. But that night, under the bruise-colored sky, the streetlights floating in puddles like trapped moons, I saw only 2 things clearly: Daniel's chair and Eleanor's eyes. One was a grave. The other was a promise. Outside my townhouse, the rain had scoured the sidewalk clean. Photographers had gone home to sleep or to sell. The lamp above my door burned a faltering gold, and for a moment I wanted to stand there and let the light paint me into someone softer, someone the internet might believe. Then I saw the shadow on my stoop, a slender stem in a glass bottle, a white lily slick with rain, and a note beneath it in Eleanor's perfect hand. "For closure," it read. "We all need it." I stepped over the flower and unlocked my door, careful not to touch the bloom, careful, at last, not to touch anything that wasn't mine. I called Maya Ortiz because grief will drown you if you don't throw it a name. She answered on the first ring, voice hoarse with sleep and outrage. "Liv? Jesus, I saw the footage." "Are you—" "I need your eyes," I said, "not your sympathy. You have both. Then listen, the story's wrong, the timeline is wrong, the laptop is wrong, and Eleanor, she's right where she wants to be." "In front of every camera in Boston," Maya said, awake now, the old instinct sparking, "which means she'll make a mistake." "She doesn't make mistakes," I said, and turned on the kitchen light. The bulb hummed. The Malden tin sat exactly where I'd left it, theatrically, cruelly, beside a pantry shelf that did not have atropine on it yesterday. "She does when she's greedy," Maya said, "and she's starving." I found a pair of latex gloves under the sink, slipped them on, and eased open the pantry door. The little amber bottle gleamed like treasure. I didn't touch it. I took a picture. Then another. I crouched to eye level and stared through the glass at a future that did not belong to me if I let someone else write it. Marcus will call at 9, I said. We start at the house, we map the cameras, we pull the building's logs, and Maya, bring your recorder. You think she'll talk to me? I think she already has, I said, and looked again at the lily on my stoop through the rain-spattered glass. For closure. And I think I'm done being polite. When I finally lay down, I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling glow and fade with every passing car, and listened to Boston breathe, and imagined Eleanor doing the same, in a house where the walls were 3 times thicker, and the art was insured for 7 figures. Somewhere in that house was a silver frame with a photograph of Daniel at 8, gap-toothed, a baseball glove swallowing his hand. Somewhere in that house was a woman who believed she could burn a daughter-in-law out of a family, like a fever. Morning would come like a verdict. Before it did, I made myself a promise under the thin, uncertain light. If I had been cast as the villain in a story I didn't write, I would write a new one. I would write with evidence and patience and fury. I would write with the kind of truth that doesn't blink when the cameras do. And when the last page turned, the prime suspect would not be me. It would be her. Boston did what Boston does after a storm. It dressed up the wreckage and sold coffee to mourners. The morning was brisk, the sidewalks salted, the sky scrubbed. Reporters perched on the opposite stoop like birds in expensive scarves, notebooks open, faces arranged in expressions that could pass for concern on a headline. Marcus and Maya arrived within minutes of each other, carrying their weapons. Marcus with his legal pad and a rolled blueprint of our building's security layout, Maya with a handheld recorder and a tote bag full of questions she could weaponize into answers. First, we keep you off camera, Marcus said, stepping past the lily I'd left on the porch as Exhibit A in a trial I hadn't been given yet. Second, we capture the interior exactly as it is. No touching, no straightening, no grief cleaning. Maya set the recorder on the island. Mind if I ask on background? Ask, I said. For now, everything is off the record. She nodded and clicked the recorder on anyway. She'll keep it for herself until I told her to use it. When did Eleanor get here last night? 10 minutes after the EMTs, I said. She let herself in with her copy of our key, hugged me, whispered that I should change. She said there would be cameras. Marcus glanced up. Did she come into the kitchen? She came everywhere, I said, and heard the bitterness in my voice like smoke. She touched the backs of chairs like a queen at inspection. Her perfume still hangs in the library. We started there. The library had the heavy quiet of a hotel room after a fight. Nothing out of place and everything wrong. The chair where Daniel died waited in its corner. Marcus marked the floor with post-its like a surgeon. I stood by the shelves and explained our rituals as if they mattered more than blood and chemistry. 1 glass each. 2 inches of Barolo because he liked to taste the argument and the tannins. He always said life made more sense in red. Maya crouched by the decanter. You didn't wipe it last night? I didn't touch it after I called, I said. The EMT knocked it with a glove, that's all. Marcus unrolled the blueprint on the coffee table. Camera 1 in the hall. Camera 2 over the back door. 3 in the library, lens angled to avoid glare. 4 in the foyer. The logs show cameras 3 and 4 went offline from 7:58 to 10:12 p.m. Which is when he died, I said. Which is when the neighbor's Ring camera was mysteriously blocked by a bouquet delivered at 7:45, Maya added. She held up her phone with a photo she'd pulled from the neighborhood app. A lavish spray of peonies and lilies, absurd in January, parked exactly where Eleanor's driver would idle. Who ordered the bouquet? Marcus asked. The florist says, a friend. Cash. Maya's mouth flattened. Guess who bought a new burner phone last week? You can't know that, I said, and heard hope as a habit I hadn't broken yet. She looked at me gently. I can know the store. I can know the time. We can ask for the footage. And we can see who walked in wearing a scarf I've seen at every winter gala for the last 5 years. Marcus exhaled. The Slayer Clause, he said, bringing us back to the war we could fight on paper while we built the one we'd fight in court. Massachusetts is clear. If a beneficiary feloniously and intentionally kills the decedent, they cannot profit from the estate. Daniel's amendment leaves you his voting shares, his non-voting interests, the Beacon Hill property, and the vineyard stake. If you're convicted, they revert to the next of kin. Eleanor, I said. He nodded. Eleanor. A photo of our wedding sat on the mantel. Me in a silk dress the color of fog, Daniel in a tux too classic to date, Eleanor in gold standing between us like a gate you opened with the right key. I remembered the toast she gave, the way the room leaned in to be blessed by that voice, smooth as good bourbon. To love, she'd said, and to understanding that love, like wealth, requires stewardship. Stewardship, as if we were assets to be managed. Maya crossed to the bar cart and stared at the crystal like it had secrets to tell. "What's your plan?" she asked. I opened the pantry and stared at the amber bottle tucked behind the Malden like a snake. First, we prove I didn't put this here. We pull prints, we subpoena delivery logs, we find the holes in the timeline, and we push our fingers through until they break. And Eleanor? Maya asked. We don't touch her, Marcus said. Not yet. We make the system do it. We build a case so clean a judge wants to frame it. I want the truth to sting, I said, and felt something steadier than rage rise in me. I want the moment it lands to be public. If she's going to make... Maya's eyes warmed, not with pity, but with recognition. A live reckoning, she said. A gala, a board meeting, somewhere she can't hide behind lawyers and pearls. The foundation gala is in 4 weeks, I said. She chairs it every year. She'll never miss it. Marcus closed his folder. Then you have 4 weeks to take back the narrative, and 1 week to survive the arraignment. I lifted the lily from my stoop and placed it, untouched, in a Ziploc. Exhibit A. Then I made coffee, for the first time since my life had a before and an after. I poured in silence, handed out mugs, and let the bitterness do its clean work on my tongue. Make me the defendant you hate to lose, I told Marcus. Already on it, he said. And make me the story people can't forget, I told Maya. She clicked the recorder off. You already are. When they left, the house looked the same, and nothing like itself. I wiped my blouse where the officer's hands had smudged it, and sat in the chair opposite Daniel's, as if proximity could conjure him. The storm had washed the city, but it hadn't washed me. I was still the woman with the handcuffs in the newspapers. I was still the widow under suspicion. I was also the only person in the room who knew what Eleanor had looked like when she thought no one was watching. That would have to be enough for now. The arraignment was a theater built to make you small. The judge peered over half-moon glasses like a hawk watching mice. The prosecutor stacked her pages as if each sheet were a nail. I wore a black suit that had been meant for boardrooms, not cages, and kept my hands folded in my lap like I'd been taught to do when the world was cruel and pretending not to be. Not guilty, Marcus said, crisp as a bell. The prosecutor, Hale, read the inventory like a woman unwrapping gifts. Residue in the decanter, search terms on my laptop, a bottle in my pantry, a motive written in the language of shares and bylaws. She let the phrase Slayer statute roll around the room like a marble. The gallery hummed. Someone rustled a candy wrapper and was glared into stillness. Bail conditions tightened around me like invisible wire. Curfew, passport surrendered, weekly check-ins. I nodded because rage looks like guilt when you show your teeth in a courtroom. Outside, Eleanor waited under a canopy of black umbrellas, held by men whose job it was to keep her dry. "My sweet girl," she said, moving toward me, mouth trembling, eyes glossy for the cameras that had found her like old friends. "I'm praying for you." Save your prayers, Maya murmured near my shoulder, recorder tucked away, eyes hard. She never says anything she can't quote later. I didn't answer Eleanor. I stepped into the car and shut the door, and if my hands were shaking, it was from the caffeine I planned to drink until midnight. We started with the building. The super, a man named Ron who wore his suspicion like a parka, surrendered the access logs under Marcus's glare. At 7:43 p.m., a key fob that belonged to Eleanor, vanity plate ELMRC, registered in the garage. At 7:58, cameras 3 and 4 blinked off. At 10:12, they returned. "We need eyes on that blind hour," Maya said, tapping her pen, pacing the lobby in a pattern that would have mapped a body if she'd only laid down. Neighbors, delivery drivers, street cams, anything. The neighbor on the second floor had a baby who didn't sleep and a night nurse who did puzzles on her phone between feedings. She'd seen the flowers delivered, produced a time-stamped photo for her sister in Kansas who loved lilies. The night nurse had seen Eleanor's driver smoking out front, scarf pulled up against the rain, car idling while the bouquet dripped on the stoop. She hadn't seen the driver go inside. "Because he didn't," I said. The doorman at the hotel across the street had a memory like a grudge. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, fumbling for a word like deference, "came out of your garage at 9:05, alone. Driver took the tunnel under Beacon. She hates rain." "Did she look wet?" Maya asked. He shook his head. "Dry as church." Which meant she hadn't been under the rain until after 9. Which meant if she'd come to me at 9:20 with hair only slightly damp, she'd had a hairdryer and a plan. Back at the townhouse, I opened the pantry again and stared at the bottle like it might move if I watched it long enough. I'd taken photographs. I'd watched Marcus call a lab and arrange a private chain of custody. Now all that was left was to wait, and waiting was something I could no longer do without feeling arrested by the air. So I set a trap. I bought a harmless UV powder online a few months ago to catch a petty thief at the foundation office, a volunteer with sticky fingers who couldn't resist the petty cash tin. The powder was invisible in daylight and loud under blacklight. It clung to skin like gossip. That afternoon, I took the unopened vial from my desk and dusted, lightly, the inside lip of the pantry where only a certain kind of person would place 2 fingers to reach for the amber bottle. I dusted the inside knob of the side door and the discreet latch on the back gate that Eleanor had once sniffed at as too rustic for Beacon Hill. Then I waited. 24 hours later, a woman from Eleanor's circle, Maris, a fundraiser with a jaw like a blade, appeared at my door with a container of soup and a face that made sympathy look like strategy. "We're all praying for you," she said, setting the soup on the island like an offering. "Eleanor wanted you to know the board is thinking of everything." "Tell the board I'm thinking too," I said, and handed her a handwritten note for Eleanor with a thanks that tasted like ash. When she left, I followed her at a distance, hoodie up, Maya at my side. Maris walked 3 blocks, turned right, and slipped into a townhouse I'd been in twice for winter galas with caviar spoons that cost more than my first car. We waited 5 minutes. Then we rang Eleanor's bell. Her house smelled like polished wood and money that had tasted the Great Depression and survived on bone and grit. She opened the door herself, silky in a charcoal sweater set, manicure pale and expensive. "Olivia," she breathed, hand to throat, "how brave of you to come." "I wanted to return your flower," I said, and held up the sealed bag with the lily inside. "It seems to belong to you." A brief flicker at the corner of her eye, annoyance, surprise, both dressed quickly in concern. Flowers arrive after tragedies. People send what they can." "They do," I said, "and some people send exactly what they intend." She stepped aside. "Come in, we should talk." I followed her to the sitting room, Maya close enough to catch the conversation by osmosis, if not by law.
The light in that room was always too soft, the art too large, the mirrors placed to make you count yourself and find you came up short. Eleanor settled into a chair as if it had been warmed for her by history. "I know you're in pain," she said, voice low, even. "And I know grief makes us look for shapes in fog. But you must not let other people fill in the shapes for you. The police will do their jobs. The truth will win." "Truth is funny," I said. "It only wins if you let it on stage." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Careful, dear. The stage can be unforgiving." Forgiveness isn't something I'm shopping for. I set the bag on the coffee table, the lily ghostly under plastic. "I want to make sure we're aligned about the gala." "The gala?" Her laugh tinkled like crystal. "Olivia, darling, you can't possibly." "I'll be there," I said, "and I'll be speaking." Something cold passed over her face, like a cloud crossing a winter sun. Then the performance resumed. "We'll discuss it, when you're cleared, of course." "When I'm cleared," I said, rising, "wear something that glows under blue light." Her eyebrows twitched. What a strange request. "Beacon Hill loves a theme," I said, and left before she could ask what I meant. Outside, Maya let out a breath she'd been holding for a year. "You're sure she'll take the bait?" "I'm sure she already has," I said, and thought of the pantry lip and the side door and the back gate latch dusted with a whisper of UV that would scream under the right lamp.
That night, I sat at my kitchen table and printed every board minute from the last 12 months. The words swam, but patterns rose. Votes, abstentions, absences that coincided with court filings and a lawsuit I hadn't known existed. Mercer and Pike was a family company in name and an armed camp in practice. If I stood between Eleanor and what she believed belonged to her by birthright, she would strap dynamite to the foundation and light the fuse with grief. I set my alarm for 5. We had a lab appointment at 7, a meeting with a PI at 9, and I'd promised myself the luxury of crying at 11. At midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't know. "Stop," it read. "You're embarrassing yourself." A second later, another text arrived, a photo this time. A close-up of my front gate under the blue hiss of a cheap blacklight, a smear on the latch glowing like an accusation. They had their own lamp. So did I. I turned off every light in the kitchen, took the small blacklight wand from the drawer, and snapped it on. The pantry lip lit up with fingerprints where no fingerprints should be. I leaned closer. The residue wasn't mine. The shape of the touch wasn't mine. My hands were small. These were not. The tips were narrower. The ring finger smudged where a stone might have caught. Eleanor wore a diamond that scraped glass. I turned off the lamp and listened to the house breathe. Somewhere upstairs, the ice maker cracked like a knuckle. My heart steadied. A thread had come loose. I pulled. Lillian delivered more than I expected. A manila folder slid across my kitchen table at 6:30 a.m., its weight disproportionate to its contents, thin sheets that could cut deeper than any knife. "Read them carefully," she said, eyes darting to the curtained windows, "and destroy them when you're done." Inside, Eleanor's calendar from the week Daniel died. Every day had appointments in her signature looping hand, except the night of the 14th. That block was a single word: contingency. More damning were the delivery receipts. One from Florals by Marquette, time-stamped 7:45 p.m., addressed to my building but billed to Eleanor's corporate card. Another from a boutique tech supplier, small, discreet, delivering a network maintenance kit to Mercer and Pike's headquarters at 3 p.m. The next day, cameras 3 and 4 went dark for exactly the amount of time Daniel died. There were emails, too. One to her driver: "Wait in the garage. Do not come upstairs unless I call." Another to an unknown address: "All set. Remove traces." I read them twice. By the third time, my fingers had gone numb. "She doesn't know I kept copies," Lillian said. "She thinks she can erase everything. She forgets I've been the one pressing send for 15 years. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the fear under the steel. You know this makes you a target. She's already replaced me in her mind, she said. Might as well go out on my own terms. Marcus's voice, when I called him, was a low hum of focus. This is gold. But it's not enough for a conviction, yet. We need a bridge between these and Daniel's death, and we need her to walk into that bridge herself. I thought about the gala, about the cameras, about the blacklight wand tucked in my desk drawer. Then we give her a stage. Eleanor didn't waste time sensing the shift. 2 days after Lillian's delivery, my phone stopped buzzing with the quiet stream of texts from board allies who'd been concerned but supportive. Emails went unanswered. Invitations disappeared. A planned meeting with the Foundation's treasurer was canceled without explanation. Marcus confirmed what I suspected. Eleanor had begun her own campaign, whispering in ears that I was dangerous, unstable, even suicidal. The kind of person who might kill a husband in a fit of despair. She's cutting you off from every potential witness, Marcus said. By the time we hit the gala, she wants you standing alone. Maya, bless her, wasn't deterred. Let her. Isolation makes for a better headline when the tide turns, but you need to be ready for her next strike. It came that night. I woke at 3 a.m. to the smell of something faint, metallic. In the kitchen, the window above the sink was cracked open. On the counter, in plain sight, sat a small amber vial, identical to the one found in my pantry. This one uncapped, a trace of powder spilling onto the marble. I didn't touch it. I didn't even breathe near it. Instead, I called Marcus, who arrived with a private crime scene tech before dawn. She's planting redundancy, he said grimly. If one bottle's chain of custody falls apart, she's got another waiting in the wings. And the fact that she can get into your home? I changed the locks. Change them again, he said, and install cameras of your own, ones she doesn't know about. By sunrise, I had 6 hidden cameras streaming to my phone, each one placed where Eleanor or anyone she sent would have to pass to reach me. The isolation game had rules. I'd just changed them. The first footage came sooner than I expected. 3 nights later, at 11:42 p.m., a figure in a dark coat approached my back gate. The hood slipped once under the motion light, revealing a flash of silver hair. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd walked this path 100 times. Eleanor.
She carried a slim leather folio. From it, she removed what looked like a flash drive and slid it through the crack of the gate, straight into the hands of a shadowed figure on the other side. The exchange lasted less than 10 seconds. Then she was gone, glancing once at the motion light as if daring it to remember her face. Maya watched the clip 3 times. That's data, something she doesn't want you, or the DA, to have. We tracked the second figure to a delivery driver named Owen Hanks, a temp contractor for a cleaning service Eleanor used at Mercer and Pike. His social media was a goldmine of carelessness. Photos of him in the company van, tagged locations that matched Eleanor's travel schedule, and, most importantly, a selfie from the night in question captioned, "Late-night drop-offs pay better." Marcus drafted a subpoena request for Owen's phone records. In the meantime, I had Lillian accidentally schedule a board prep meeting with me and Eleanor in the same room. When she arrived, immaculate as ever, I handed her a copy of the gala program. "I'd like to propose a short memorial segment for Daniel," I said sweetly. Her eyes narrowed just enough for me to see it. "We'll see if there's time, dear." "There will be," I said. "I'm quite sure of it." The gala was 3 weeks away. Every move from here on had to serve 2 purposes: gather evidence and keep Eleanor convinced she was still in control. Marcus coordinated with the DA's office quietly, feeding them select pieces, enough to keep them interested, not enough to tip Eleanor off. Maya worked on the public narrative, planting subtle stories in lifestyle columns about widows reclaiming their power, about women in high society facing betrayal. None of them mentioned me by name, but the undercurrent was there. Meanwhile, Lillian delivered one final gift: a list of Eleanor's personal expenditures, buried in Foundation expense reports. Among them, a payment to a lighting consultant the week after Daniel's death. The company specialized in event effects, including UV reactive installations. "She's planning something for the gala," I said. Then we use it against her, Marcus replied. The plan was simple in theory, dangerous in execution. During my scheduled 2-minute thank you speech, a concession Eleanor agreed to for optics, I would present a tribute to Daniel that required dimmed lights and a special UV filter. Hidden in that display would be the blacklight reveal of her prints glowing on the poisoned bottle, magnified on the massive screen behind me. To pull it off, we'd need the cooperation of the AV team, the element of surprise, and Eleanor's complete ignorance until the moment the lights dropped. As I rehearsed my speech in the quiet of my living room, I realized my hands weren't shaking. Not anymore. For months, I'd been playing defense. Now, for the first time, I could feel the momentum tilting forward, toward her, and toward the moment she'd have nowhere left to run. Boston was in that restless state between winter and spring, the air sharp enough to sting, but the promise of thaw just close enough to make you impatient. The gala was less than 24 hours away. Marcus sat across from me in my kitchen, the blue glow from my laptop casting shadows on the paperwork spread between us. "We've got the AV team locked," he said, tapping the contract. "They'll run the blacklight segment exactly on your cue. No one but the head tech knows what's really in the file." "What about security?" I asked. "They'll be watching Eleanor the moment the lights drop. If she bolts, they'll follow. If she tries to interfere, they'll stop her." Maya leaned against the counter, sipping coffee that had long since gone cold. "Remember, Olivia, this only works if you keep her calm until that exact second. If she even suspects, she'll try to cancel the segment or pull the plug on the screens." "She won't suspect," I said. "She thinks she's already won."
Still, sleep didn't come easy. Every sound in the townhouse seemed amplified. The creak of the stairs, the distant hum of the fridge. I sat at the window in my robe, watching Beacon Hill's cobblestones glisten under the street lamps, thinking about Daniel. Not the way he looked in that chair, slumped, still, but the way he used to stand in doorways, leaning just enough to suggest he had all the time in the world. I wondered what he would think of this, of me. When the clock hit 3 a.m., I closed the curtains and went upstairs. Tomorrow wasn't just about proving my innocence. It was about making sure Eleanor never had the power to do this to anyone else. The Fairmont Ballroom was a cathedral of glass and gold that night. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, the air thick with perfume, champagne, and whispers. I arrived in black satin, a widow's dress sharpened with clean lines. The neckline was high, the sleeves long, but the cut was lethal. Maya walked beside me in deep emerald, Marcus trailing just close enough to watch Eleanor's every move. She was already holding court near the entrance, a halo of board members around her. "Olivia," she purred when she saw me, taking my hands like we were friends. The diamond on her ring finger winked in the light. "I'm so glad you could make it. Daniel would want you here." I smiled just enough to pass for polite. I wouldn't miss it. Dinner passed in a blur of forced toasts and overcooked filet. My mind was on the moment to come, the script I'd rehearsed until I could speak it in my sleep. The program ticked forward. Auction, donor acknowledgments, a scholarship announcement, and then my cue. The MC's voice rang out. "And now, a few words from Daniel's wife, Olivia Mercer." The room's murmur quieted as I walked to the podium. The AV tech caught my eye from the booth and gave a small nod. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady. "Tonight is about legacy, Daniel's legacy, and about truth, the kind that survives storms, scandals, and shadows." A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd, but I kept going. "They say grief makes you see ghosts. I don't believe that. I believe grief strips away illusions, and when you see clearly, you can't unsee." I glanced toward Eleanor. Her expression was still smooth, but her fingers tightened around her wineglass. "Before we continue," I said, "I'd like to share something with you all. A moment, illuminated." On my cue, the ballroom lights dimmed. The giant screens behind me went black, then glowed deep violet as the blacklight effect filled the space. On the screen, magnified tenfold, was the pantry bottle,
the one found in my home. Fingerprints glowed electric blue against the glass. A caption appeared beneath, "Forensic match to Eleanor Mercer." Gasps cracked through the room like gunfire. Cameras clicked. Someone's wineglass shattered. Eleanor froze. Then she laughed, a brittle, too loud sound. "This is absurd, fabricated." Marcus's voice cut in from the side of the stage. "It's not fabricated. The DA's office received this evidence 3 days ago." Security moved in. The UV light caught the diamond on her ring, making it flare like a warning. The DA's investigator stepped into the spill of violet light, holding up a warrant. "Eleanor Mercer, you are under arrest for evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy." For a second, she didn't move. Then the mask slipped, rage twisting her face into something sharp and cold. "You think this will stick?" she hissed. "It already has," I said. They cuffed her there, in front of Boston's elite, the cameras, the donors who'd hung on her every word for decades. The murmurs rose into a roar. Some turned away, others leaned in, hungry for every detail. As they led her past me, she paused just enough to meet my eyes. "You'll regret this. Not as much as you will."
When she was gone, the lights came back up. The MC stammered something about dessert, but no one was listening. The damage was done. In the weeks that followed, the press feasted. The fingerprint evidence, the delivery receipts, the video footage of her at my gate, it all came out. The DA added charges tied to Daniel's death, the financial manipulation, even the Cayman accounts. Lillian disappeared into a new life, her board position secured. Maya's feature on The Widow Who Fought Back became one of the most read pieces of the year. Marcus, he never once said, "I told you so," but the way he raised his glass at the vineyard the day the case was dropped said enough. I went back to my townhouse. The locks changed again, the windows clean of fingerprints. Daniel's chair still sat in the library, empty, but it no longer felt like a grave. Beacon Hill moved on. People always do. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that gala, the exact moment the lights went out and the truth lit up like fire. It wasn't just justice. It was closure. And I'd taken it back, on my terms.